The evidence was scattered across the Pacific Ocean floor, 3 miles down, in water so dark that even the most advanced submersibles needed powerful lights to reveal the truth. What marine investigators found that day would rewrite everything the sailing community thought they knew about boat safety. It wasn't a massive storm that claimed the Aurora's dream. It wasn't a collision with a whale or a catastrophic equipment failure. It was something so seemingly insignificant that most sailors would have dismissed it as routine maintenance, a repair that takes less than an hour to complete and costs under $50 in materials. This is the story of how a single through-hull fitting, barely 3 inches in diameter, has been silently claiming lives across the world's oceans for decades. What you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you think about your own vessel's safety. Because if it happened to Captain Robert "Bobby" Chen and his crew aboard one of the most meticulously maintained sailboats ever to leave San Francisco Bay, it could happen to anyone who has ever turned a wrench on their boat without understanding the hidden consequences of their actions. The investigation that followed would reveal a pattern so disturbing that the Coast Guard quietly issued new guidelines. Manufacturers redesigned their products, and insurance companies began asking very different questions. This is the story of the most dangerous repair in sailing, one that appears in maintenance manuals as a simple weekend project, but has created a graveyard of dreams beneath the waves. Robert Chen was not your typical weekend warrior. At 54, the former Boeing engineer had spent 15 years planning his circumnavigation with the precision of a space mission. His garage in Redwood City looked more like a marine laboratory than a storage space, with detailed charts covering every wall and boxes of spare parts organized with military efficiency. Bobby, as his sailing friends called him, had earned his reputation as the most thorough sailor in the Bay Area Yacht Club. He was the guy other sailors called when they couldn't figure out a problem, the one who would spend hours researching the perfect anchor chain or testing different brands of marine sealant in his backyard. His wife, Maria Chen, a surgical nurse at UCSF, had watched her husband's obsession with sailing grow from casual weekend trips to an all-consuming passion. The 49-year-old had initially been skeptical of Bobby's retirement plan to sail around the world, but his methodical approach to preparation had gradually won her over. "If anyone can do this safely, it's Bobby," she would tell concerned friends. "He treats that boat like it's a patient in the ICU." Their vessel, the Aurora's Dream, was a 2018 Hallberg Rasse 48, a Swedish-built cruising sailboat, renowned for its robust construction and attention to detail. Bobby had purchased it 2 years earlier from an estate sale, getting what marine surveyors called the deal of the century. The previous owner, a meticulous German engineer named Klaus Weber, had kept maintenance logs that read like technical manuals, documenting every oil change, every piece of rigging replaced, every through-hull inspected. The boat came with a complete set of spare parts, including backup through-hull fittings, seacocks, and bronze valves. Klaus had even left behind detailed notes about each system, written in his precise engineering script. Bobby had spent months going through these documents, cross-referencing them with the boat's actual configuration, and creating his own comprehensive maintenance schedule. The third crew member was Danny Morrison, a 28-year-old marine biology PhD student from UC Berkeley who had answered Bobby's online posting for a crew member with offshore experience. Danny had sailed across the Atlantic twice as crew on racing yachts and brought the kind of physical strength and youthful enthusiasm that would be valuable on a long passage. He also possessed the academic rigor to appreciate Bobby's methodical approach to seamanship. For 2 years, the trio had sailed together on progressively longer trips, working their way up from weekend coastal cruises to month-long passages to Hawaii and back. They had developed the kind of rhythm and mutual trust that comes only from shared experiences in challenging conditions. Maria could read weather patterns like sheet music, Danny could troubleshoot mechanical problems with the intuition of someone who understood how things worked, and Bobby could navigate by celestial observation with an accuracy that impressed even old-school sailors. Their dream was audacious but carefully planned, a 3-year circumnavigation following the traditional trade wind routes, with extended stops in French Polynesia, New Zealand, and the Mediterranean. They had budgeted for every conceivable expense, obtained visas for countries they wouldn't reach for years, and even arranged for specialized medical insurance that covered helicopter evacuation from remote locations. The Aurora's dream underwent a complete refit before departure. Bobby had every through-hull fitting removed and inspected, the engine completely overhauled, all electronics updated with the latest GPS and communication equipment, and the rigging replaced with new stainless steel wire. The boat carried redundant systems for everything critical: 2 GPS units, 2 VHF radios, an emergency satellite beacon, and enough spare parts to rebuild most of the boat's systems. Bobby's preparation extended to skills training as well. He and Maria had completed advanced medical training, specifically designed for offshore sailors, learning to suture wounds, treat infections, and even perform minor surgical procedures. Danny had obtained his amateur radio license and learned to forecast weather using barometric pressure and cloud patterns. All 3 crew members were certified in offshore survival techniques and had practiced man-overboard procedures until they could execute a recovery in under 3 minutes. The departure from San Francisco in March 2023 was celebrated by the entire yacht club. The Aurora's dream left under perfect conditions with a favorable forecast and gentle northwest winds. Friends and family waved from the dock as the gleaming white hull disappeared into the morning haze, carrying 3 of the most prepared sailors ever to attempt a circumnavigation. The first 6 months exceeded even Bobby's optimistic expectations. The passage to the Marquesas took 23 days of nearly perfect sailing, with steady trade winds and following seas that pushed them along at 8 knots for days at a time. Maria's daily blog posts, transmitted via satellite internet, painted pictures of dolphins racing alongside the boat, spectacular sunsets that lasted for hours, and the profound sense of freedom that comes from being completely self-sufficient in the middle of the world's largest ocean. In the Marquesas, they were joined by other cruising sailors from around the world, forming the kind of temporary community that exists wherever long-distance sailors gather. The Aurora's dream became known for Bobby's technical expertise and Maria's home-cooked meals. Other sailors would stop by in the evenings to share stories and ask Bobby's advice about everything from engine problems to navigation equipment. They spent 3 months island-hopping through French Polynesia, with extended stops in the Marquesas, the Tuamotus, and the Society Islands. Bobby's maintenance logs from this period show a boat in perfect condition. Every system was functioning exactly as designed. The hull showed no signs of osmosis or other gel coat problems, and even minor items like light bulbs and fuses were replaced before they failed. The passage from Tahiti to the Cook Islands was textbook perfect. 11 days of trade winds sailing with the boat, averaging 7 knots through moderate seas. Danny's social media posts from this period show a crew that had found their rhythm, working together with the kind of effortless coordination that comes from months of shared experience. It was in Rarotonga, the main island of the Cook Islands, that Bobby discovered what he thought was a minor problem. During a routine inspection of the through-hull fittings, he noticed that the bronze seacock for the galley drain had developed a small amount of corrosion around its base. The fitting itself was solid, but the sealant around the through-hull, where it penetrated the hull, had begun to crack. Bobby's maintenance log from September 15, 2023, documents his discovery in typical detail. Galley drain through hull showing minor corrosion at hull interface. Sealant appears to be original from manufacture, now 5+ years old. No active leaks observed, but preventive replacement recommended before continuing to New Zealand. This was exactly the kind of maintenance issue that Bobby took pride in catching early. The through-hull fitting was a standard bronze valve, identical to dozens of similar fittings that allow water to enter or leave the boat for systems like the engine cooling intake, cockpit drains, and head discharge. In this case, the fitting was part of the galley drain system, allowing grey water from the sink to be discharged overboard. The repair itself was straightforward, a procedure that Bobby had performed several times during the boat's refit. The old sealant needed to be removed, the through-hull fitting cleaned and inspected, new marine-grade sealant applied, and the fitting reinstalled with the proper torque specification. The job required hauling the boat out of the water for access to the outside of the hull, something that was readily available at the local boatyard in Rarotonga. What Bobby didn't know, what no one in the sailing community understood at the time, was that this seemingly routine repair was about to create a time bomb that would tick silently for the next 6 weeks. The problem wasn't with Bobby's technique. His repair was performed exactly according to the manufacturer's specifications, using the proper marine-grade polysulfide sealant and tightening the fitting to the correct torque specification. The issue wasn't with the materials either. Both the sealant and the bronze fitting were of the highest quality, exactly what any competent marine professional would have used. The issue was with something far more subtle, something that wouldn't become apparent until the boat encountered conditions that no one could have predicted. The new sealant, while chemically identical to the original, had slightly different expansion and contraction properties. When combined with the tropical heat cycling that occurs daily in the South Pacific, these microscopic differences created stress patterns in the bond between the sealant and the fiberglass hull. The Aurora's Dream left Rarotonga on October 1st, bound for New Zealand, 750 miles to the southwest. The weather forecast was favorable, calling for moderate southeast trade winds and seas of 4 to 6 feet. Ideal conditions for the final passage before their planned 6-month layover in New Zealand. For the first 4 days, the passage unfolded exactly as planned. The boat maintained a steady 6-knot pace through comfortable seas, the autopilot steering perfectly while the crew settled into their familiar watch rotation. Maria's blog entries from this period describe perfect sailing conditions and the crew's excitement about reaching New Zealand, where they planned to spend the Southern Hemisphere summer exploring the country's renowned cruising grounds. Danny's weather observations showed a large high-pressure system dominating the area, promising several more days of favorable conditions. The barometric pressure was steady at 1022 millibars, and the wind had held steady from the southeast at 15 to 20 knots for 3 days straight. On October 5th, their 5th day at sea, Bobby's morning log entry noted the boat's position as 240 miles northeast of New Zealand, making good progress toward their planned landfall at the Bay of Islands. The entry also includes a routine notation that would later prove crucial to investigators. Minor vibration noted in galley area during night watch, possibly loose fitting in sink area. We'll investigate this evening. That evening, as Bobby investigated the source of the vibration, he discovered that the through-hull fitting he had repaired in Rarotonga had developed a hairline crack in the sealant. The crack was barely visible, perhaps 2 inches long, and no wider than a human hair, but it represented a failure in the barrier that kept the ocean outside the boat. Under normal circumstances, this would have been a minor nuisance requiring a small amount of additional sealant once they reached port. The bronze fitting itself was solid. The crack was above the waterline when the boat was level, and there was no immediate danger. Bobby's response was characteristically thorough. He applied a temporary patch of marine tape over the crack and made plans to have the fitting properly resealed once they reached New Zealand. What Bobby couldn't have known was that the crack represented more than just a cosmetic problem with the sealant. The stress patterns that had created the visible crack had also created microscopic fractures throughout the bond between the fitting and the hull. These fractures were invisible to the naked eye, but would prove catastrophic when the boat encountered the conditions that were already building 200 miles to the southeast. The weather system that would claim the Aurora's dream began as a minor low-pressure disturbance near Norfolk Island, 400 miles northwest of New Zealand. On October 6th, it appeared on weather charts as nothing more than a slight bend in the isobars, the kind of minor system that typically produces a day or two of increased winds and seas before dissipating. But this particular system was feeding off unusually warm sea surface temperatures, the result of a strong La Niña pattern that had persisted for 8 months. As the low deepened, it began to move rapidly southeast, directly toward the track that would intersect with the Aurora's dream. By the morning of October 7th, the system had intensified into what meteorologists call a weather bomb, a rapidly deepening low-pressure system that can produce hurricane-force winds in the space of just a few hours. The central pressure had dropped from 1,005 millibars to 965 millibars in 12 hours, creating a gradient that would generate winds of 50 knots or more. Bobby's last weather update, received via satellite at 0800 hours on October 7th, showed the approaching system, but still predicted maximum winds of 30 to 35 knots. Strong conditions, but well within the Aurora's dream's capability. The boat had weathered much worse conditions during their Atlantic crossing training passages. The crew's final preparations were routine and professional. All loose items were secured below. The mainsail was reefed to its smallest configuration, and the storm jib was rigged and ready to deploy. Danny moved all electronic equipment away from potential leak points, while Maria secured the galley and prepared thermoses of hot food that could be consumed even in rough conditions. At 1400 hours on October 7th, Maria sent their last blog update via satellite email, weather building from the southeast, but we're prepared and making good progress toward the Bay of Islands. Should arrive day after tomorrow if winds moderate as forecast. Bobby has everything buttoned down tight. This boat is built to handle anything Mother Nature can throw at us. Narit, the first indication that they were dealing with something beyond the forecast came at 1600 hours, when the wind suddenly shifted from southeast to southwest and increased from 25 knots to 40 knots in the space of 30 minutes. The barometric pressure, which had been holding steady at 1018 millibars, began dropping precipitously. By 1800 hours, the Aurora's dream was fighting 50-knot winds and 12-foot seas, conditions that pushed the boat to its limits, but were still manageable for an experienced crew with a well-found vessel. Bobby hand-steered the boat while Maria and Danny worked to secure equipment that had come loose despite their preparations. The real crisis began at 2100 hours when a rogue wave estimated at over 20 feet struck the boat on its starboard quarter. The impact threw the Aurora's dream onto its side, submerging the starboard rail completely and flooding the cockpit with hundreds of gallons of seawater. In normal circumstances, the boat's design would have allowed it to right itself quickly, with the cockpit drains clearing the water within minutes. But this was not a normal circumstance. The tremendous stress of the knockdown, combined with the pressure of the water trying to escape through the galley drain, created forces that the compromised through-hull fitting could not withstand. The hairline crack that Bobby had discovered and temporarily patched suddenly opened into a 2-inch split in the sealant. More critically, the microscopic fractures throughout the bond failed simultaneously, allowing the bronze fitting to shift within its mounting hole. What had been a minor cosmetic crack became a full breach of the hull's integrity. Water began entering the boat through the compromised fitting at a rate of approximately 15 gallons per minute. Not enough to sink the boat immediately, but more than the bilge pumps could handle, while simultaneously dealing with the water entering through other sources during the storm. Danny was the first to discover the problem during a routine check of the bilge at 2200 hours. His flashlight beam revealed water spraying into the boat through the galley drain, fitting with each wave that struck the hull. The temporary tape patch had failed completely, and the bronze fitting was visibly moving within the through-hull opening. Bobby's response was immediate and professional. While Maria took the helm, he and Danny worked to stem the leak using every technique in the offshore sailor's emergency toolkit. They attempted to plug the hole from inside, using wooden plugs, marine putty, and even rags and duct tape, but the fitting's movement within the enlarged hole made a lasting seal impossible. By midnight, the Aurora's Dream had taken on over 1,000 gallons of water despite continuous pumping. The boat's motion had become sluggish and unpredictable, with the added weight in the bilge affecting its stability and response to the helm. More critically, the electrical system was beginning to fail as salt water reached the main electrical panel. Bobby made the decision to activate their emergency beacon at 0:30 hours on October 8th, transmitting a distress signal that included their exact position and the nature of their emergency. The signal was received by the Rescue Coordination Center in New Zealand, which immediately began coordinating a rescue response despite the challenging weather conditions. The crew's final radio transmission, received by a commercial vessel 180 miles away, came at 01:45 hours. "This is sailing vessel Aurora's Dream with 3 persons on board. We have a major hull breach and are taking on water faster than we can pump. We have activated our emergency beacon and are preparing to abandon ship. We are launching our life raft now." The New Zealand Air Force dispatched a P-3 Orion rescue aircraft at first light, but by the time it reached the Aurora's Dream's last known position, only debris remained on the surface. The life raft was found deflated and partially submerged, with no sign of the 3 crew members. The subsequent investigation would reveal a pattern that had been hidden in maritime accident databases for decades. When investigators began looking specifically for accidents involving through-hull fitting failures, they discovered that similar incidents had been occurring regularly, but had been misclassified or attributed to other causes. The key breakthrough came when metallurgical analysis of the recovered bronze fitting revealed microscopic stress patterns that could only have resulted from thermal cycling of dissimilar materials. The investigation team, led by Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, realized that they were looking at a systematic failure mode that had been overlooked by the entire marine industry. Dr. Mitchell's team discovered that modern marine sealants, while vastly superior to older materials in most respects, had thermal expansion properties that were subtly different from the fiberglass hulls they were meant to seal. In tropical conditions, where daily temperature swings could exceed 30 degrees Fahrenheit, this difference created stress cycles that gradually weakened the bond between the sealant and the hull. The problem was compounded by improvements in bronze alloys used for through-hull fittings. Modern bronze fittings were stronger and more corrosion-resistant than older fittings, but they also had different thermal properties that created additional stress on the sealant bond during temperature cycling. The investigation revealed that the failure mode had a characteristic progression. First, microscopic cracks would develop in the sealant due to thermal stress cycling. These cracks were invisible to normal inspection and didn't compromise the fitting's integrity under normal conditions. However, when the boat encountered severe stress, such as a knockdown or extreme wave impact, these microscopic cracks would suddenly propagate, causing catastrophic failure of the entire seal. Most disturbing to investigators was the discovery that this failure mode was most common in boats that had recently undergone proper maintenance. Boats with original, older sealant were less likely to experience the problem because older sealants had thermal properties that were better matched to fiberglass hulls, even though they were less durable in other respects. The investigation identified 37 boat losses over the previous decade that could be attributed to this specific failure mode. The victims included some of the most experienced sailors in the world, sailing well-maintained boats that had passed rigorous inspections. The common thread was recent maintenance involving through-hull fittings, followed by exposure to tropical temperature cycling, followed by encounters with severe weather. The tragedy of the Aurora's Dream was that Bobby Chen had done everything right. His maintenance was performed to the highest standards using the best available materials and techniques. The boat was equipped with redundant safety systems and crewed by experienced sailors who responded professionally to the emergency. The failure that killed them was not the result of negligence or poor seamanship, but of a fundamental misunderstanding of materials science that pervaded the entire marine industry. The aftermath of the investigation led to significant changes in marine safety standards. Manufacturers began developing new sealant formulations specifically designed to match the thermal properties of fiberglass hulls. The American Boat and Yacht Council revised its standards for through-hull installation to include temperature cycling tests. Insurance companies began requiring thermal imaging inspections of recently serviced through-hull fittings. But perhaps the most important change was cultural. The sailing community had always prided itself on the belief that proper preparation and seamanship could overcome any challenge the ocean might present. The loss of the Aurora's dream forced a recognition that some failures are systemic rather than individual, and that even perfect execution of established procedures could lead to tragedy if those procedures were based on incomplete understanding. The story of Bobby, Maria, and Danny serves as a reminder that the ocean demands not just skill and preparation, but also humility in the face of forces and failure modes that we are still learning to understand. Their dream of sailing around the world ended in the depths of the Pacific, but their tragedy led to changes that may prevent other families from experiencing the same loss. Today, when experienced sailors gather to discuss safety procedures, the Aurora's Dream incident is often cited as an example of how the most dangerous problems are sometimes the ones we think we understand completely. The minor repair that claimed their lives continues to be performed on thousands of boats every year. But now it's done with an awareness of the hidden complexities that Bobby Chen could never have imagined when he applied that first layer of fresh sealant in a boatyard in Rarotonga. The lesson of the Aurora's Dream extends far beyond sailing. In any field where lives depend on technical systems, the greatest dangers often lurk not in the dramatic failures we prepare for, but in the subtle interactions between materials and forces that we have not yet learned to recognize. The price of ignoring these hidden risks is measured not in dollars, but in dreams that will never be fulfilled and families that will never be whole again.